Basically, my argument about AI right now is that there's this kind of overwhelming patriarchal narrative about AI that it's going to allow you to do even more, which is just this like productivity narrative that I think is highly toxic because I'm like, I don't know a single woman who needs to do more. I know a lot of women who need to be able to do less.
This is the Angel Next Door podcast, where we will talk about all things angel investing, what it is, who does it, how do we find them, what does it mean to invest in an early stage company? If you have ever wondered how you can affect the change you want to see in the world, then tune in to learn more.
In this episode, I'm talking to my friend and fellow angel investor, Madeline Reeves, for a candid conversation about her non-traditional path from medical anthropology to the heights of business development and creative consultancy. Madeline shares how her experiences as a single mom and young executive fueled her drive to build Fearless Foundry, a creative agency dedicated to purpose-driven brands, and reveals behind-the-scenes stories of overcoming glass ceilings, starting companies, and recently leading an innovative 7-city tour. We dig deep into the power of intentional branding and the real impact of AI bias on women in business, and why disrupting the status quo is more important than ever. Her big message: don't create content for content's sake. Have a strategy. Enjoy the show. Well, Madeline, welcome to the Angel Next Door podcast.
It's so good to be here with you.
I'm so excited to see you again. And I got to see you in real life just a few weeks ago, which was so much fun. So tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you're working on right now.
Okay. And I want to say first and foremost, it was so amazing to walk in that room and see you in person. That was a really special moment. I'm like, I always thought Women's Venture Summit would be a who's who, but it was amazing to walk in and be like, wait, I know like half of you.
They're good.
So yeah, my background is a little bit non-traditional, but I think for a lot of us women especially, we have paths that kind of are a little bit winding. And I like to tell the story because it leads people to realize that you don't necessarily have to be linear in your approach. So my background actually was originally, I went to school for medical anthropology and global health and thought that I was going to become a pediatric oncologist, which is wildly different than what I do on my day-to-day basis. But my undergrad degree and all my schooling from University of Washington was in medical anthropology. And I think that, is really important to call in because I encourage a lot of people to explore anthropology as a field of study because it teaches you just how to learn and how to study people. And there's so many different avenues that you can take an anthropology degree that I see show up now in the work that I do in terms of like business development and marketing and working a lot with people. And it really was a degree that taught me how to study systems and how to understand culture and people really well. During my time at school, my life took like a slightly different and bit of an unexpected turn. I had my first kid when I was a junior in college, which is a very quick way to make sure that you're a pariah on a college campus because everybody doesn't want to be friends with the pregnant girl. And like at the age of 20, I became a mom and finished up my degree. But by the time I was 22, I parted ways with my son's dad. He was an addict and was really struggling. And so I was a single mom by the time I was 22. And at that point in my life, it was more about what can I do to make money to provide for my kiddo. And also, I was getting out of school in a really trying time, especially in the field of study. For context for folks, this was a time when basically there was a ton of funding pulled from biomedical research. And so I thought I was going to go into research and there were just not jobs available. And in a happenstance way, I ran into a former professor of mine who had started working at a fintech software company. And she had said, I think it's a great place. You can get a job right out of school, check it out. And so just based off of happenstance, I ended up in an inside sales team in a software startup that was working on a really complicated problem in the sales tax space. And I'm just a person who can see problems, create solutions. And so one thing led to the next. I grew inside that company pretty quickly and then got recognized by the team over at Intuit to join their business development group. And so did that for a little while and then joined another company in the fintech space. And so basically the first kind of 5 to 10 years of my career were working inside of software startups, especially on business development and go-to-market strategy. And then, as oftentimes I think women do, I started to hit that like really great glass ceiling over and over again, where it was like every room I walked into, I was the youngest woman, the only woman. And I was doing a lot of deal making, which is something I'm really passionate about, but wasn't really getting credit where credit was due. I wasn't being compensated based off of the things I was closing. I was being told, oh, you're the most expensive employee inside of the company, even though this company was based in a foreign market. And so I was being paid in like a translation factor dollar wise. But it was like, oh, we can't possibly spend any more money on you, even though I was making these people tens of millions of dollars. And I got to a point after 3 to 4 years there where I was trying to renegotiate my role. And what happened was I was told that basically, rather than giving me the flexibility and freedom I was asking for at this point, I'd had another kiddo, that they wanted to offer me a counter of 3/5 of my salary and the ability to be more of a mom. And yeah, I'm like watching your face.
Wow.
I'm like, no, And again, I was a mom to 2 kids at this point. I'd been traveling 60 to 70% of the time, mostly international for the company. I'd not really seen a pay increase in 3 years. I had been promised equity on the back of a napkin, basically. And also at that renegotiation, they said, oh, and by the way, that equity that you were promised, that's not going to happen. And so it was a really hard moment because I had built this reputation in the industry. I had risen through the ranks really swiftly. I was one of the youngest junior execs in my space, but I was like, I don't see a place in this industry for me. And fortunately enough, I had enough female friends around me who were entrepreneurs who were like, you should just start your own thing. And so I had done some side math and started to have people asking me to consult. And so I started one of my first companies, Fearless Foundry, back in 2018. I'd really started it on paper in 2017. I'd incorporated the entity, but went full time kind of 2018, 2019 timeline because I needed a way out. And so it started just as a consultancy with myself. And then over time, I built scale and structure and built it into a team of people that's always fluctuated between 5 and 12 people at a time. But it is primary way that I do my work today. And also, like most of us, I have a bunch of other projects that I'm working on as well. So one that I'm particularly excited is I'm a co-founder of a new fintech startup that's a tax product. And I'm always working around early stage companies and consulting on their growth strategies as well. So I'm never bored, to say the least.
I can see that. And even when I saw you a couple of weeks ago, you're like, I'm about to go on this 7-city tour. And I was like, wow, you'll have to tell us about that in a minute. But tell us specifically about what Fearless Foundry does and how you help entrepreneurs.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so Fearless Foundry is a creative consultancy, and we call ourselves a creative consultancy because we feel like the traditional marketing agency approach is a bit broken. And so what we really focus on is 3 core areas, which is marketing, branding, and business development with a lens for go-to-market strategy. And so all of our clients get the experience of an agency that really loves branding and sees brand to the core as to what makes companies successful, but then also has a strategic approach to business development baked into our model. So we're not just helping you create content for content's sake. We're thinking about what is your wider strategy that's going into the work that we're doing that really leads to whatever the outcome or result is. And so we work with all sorts of different founders across industries. Some of our largest clients are more like Fortune 500 companies that come to us particularly for really strategic projects that we have industry knowledge in. And our more general clients come to us for branding or outsourced marketing services. And the real benefit that they get there is the ability to basically work with a dedicated team that has a lot of knowledge and experience without the cost of having to maintain those people in-house. And I think we're entering in this really interesting era in business where more and more people are realizing like, oh, I can scale a lot smarter by outsourcing the areas that are not my core competency and are not my core expertise. And most people don't need a marketing team until their business is in the multiple of millions. And so for a lot of those companies that are like under 10 million, it makes a lot more sense for them to outsource and work with a team that has a really strong zone of genius in that area than to hire people who are working part or full time and don't have those full-fledged capabilities. And that's core to our work. Our team has expertise across all the areas you'd expect: copywriting, design, brand work, et cetera. And then all of our clients get the benefit of working with an outsourced CMO as well. And so it's the experience of bringing in that full marketing team without having to spend the money to have those things in-house. And it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of different things. We build websites, we do content creation, we do a lot of experiential marketing like the event that you were talking about. And so it gives us an opportunity for our creative team to really play. But our big passion is really working with organizations that have a really strong mission behind them and see their purpose as being like change agents or people who are disrupting the status quo when it comes to the systems they're a part of, as opposed to just being generic folks who are just around to make as much profit as possible.
Yeah, I love what you say about not necessarily having content just for content's sake. And I think sometimes, especially smaller companies, they think, oh, I can't really put any money behind branding. I'm just got to get customers. So I have to do all this direct marketing. And they're not really telling the story then about their company, what they're doing, what their mission is, like what they're really aligned with. So talk a little bit more about that and the whole branding concept.
Yeah, brand is really at the heart of what we do. And it's something that I'm really proud that we integrate into all of our work, because most companies, when they approach us, they're at one of 2 apex moments. One is either they're brand new, and so they need to launch something, and the brand is obviously foundation of that. But the other point that people reach out to us is often where they've built a brand, and I'm putting that in air quotes for those of you who can't see, but have reached this like kind of critical market moment where the brand is not really living up to what they've built. And so what I mean by that is that they have the kind of classic brand identity elements is what we call them. So they have a logo, they've got some color palettes, maybe they have a website that like works well enough, but they haven't done any of the deeper vision and strategy work necessary to really understand what they stand for, who they're here to serve, what their message is, what is their elevator pitch. And so core to our brand process is this element of brand strategy where we guide founders and teams through the process of really discovering what it is that their business is really meant to do in the world and really visioning that out so that can be integrated. There's this great thing that I saw the other day that was talking about the difference of marketing and branding. And it's like branding is the thing that people say about you when you're not around. It's the way that you make them feel. It's the reason why they choose you over something else. And so it can feel a little bit intangible and esoteric, but really it has to get down to the fact that people who have strong brands really know what they're meant to stand for in a market. And also they know really who they're not here to serve. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people make as not a critic-worthy mistake, but a common mistake. In the early days, it's like, we're just trying to be everything for everybody, right? Like we're just trying to get whoever's going to spend money on us. And you get to that point in business where you're not really standing out. You're not really drawing in the clients that you want to serve. And so you have to take this moment to really reset and look a little bit closer and then determine who are we not here for? Because when done well, brand should be something that repels those wrong people away, but also speaks so clearly and loudly to the people that you're supposed to serve.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I love that. Like, it's what people say about you when you're not around. That is so true. So tell us a little bit more about the 7-city tour you were just on. I know in some cases you were talking about AI and women in AI, so we want to hear all about that.
Yeah, so the tour was a really fun opportunity for our team to just flex our creative might and muscle. So as a bit of background, many of our clients, because of my history, are in the fintech space and kind of fintech and accounting. And one of the things that we've seen in that industry that I think is, I'm curious for your feedback here, Marcia, but I think is indicative of the finance industry at large right now, is that there's just like a really big disconnect between the companies that are creating products for professionals and the professionals themselves. And so we have a lot of clients that, like I said, who are these kind of fintech software companies, and they are just getting no ROI off of their old strategies, whether that's like going to events or putting on webinars or things like that. And so I had this moment of inspiration last year where I was like, we need to just create a better way to really connect with this audience of professionals. I have a lot of heart and history in this industry, and I had gone out to some of the kind of traditional events in industry and was just feeling like this hasn't changed. This is the same shit that people have been doing for the last 10 years. And when I would talk to attendees and folks, there was also a diminishing return for them. They were like, yeah, I'm spending more than ever to travel to these conferences, and I'm not really taking anything home. I'm not really learning anything. My inner nerd loves curriculum creation. And so what I did is I worked with a series of companies and a series of kind of industry professionals to create a day's worth of learning around the topic of delivering advisory services. And so this tour was called Advisory Amplified. And it was really meant to solve for this bigger thing going on in the accounting and finance industry, which is like everybody's being told, you must become the trusted advisor to your client. And yet they're not really being taught what that looks like. How do you deliver that as a service? How do you have those conversations? How do you productize that? How do you price it? And so we built a curriculum that went with the day that literally walks them step by step, what it looks like through to deliver those services, and then paired all the content with industry professionals who have a lot of experience, and then brought it on the road. So rather than people having to go to a conference, having to travel, we brought it to 6 different cities around the country, and we met with more than 300 firm owners in different cities and just had this really amazing opportunity to put the content in the hands of people. I was like, my big nerd moment was like people had like a 42-page workbook that they got their hands on. And it was really tangible. It was really helping them inside of their practice. And so it was a whirlwind 3 weeks. Like you said, AI was a part of this conversation as well, because I think one of the things that's disrupting this industry as well as so many others is the notion of AI. And what we were really talking to these practitioners about was like, how do you integrate AI into the ways that you're doing this work? Because let's be honest, in 2, 3, 5 years, you're not going to be somebody who's just over here like filling out a tax return or reconciling transactions for your clients. Your role is going to change. You're going to have to be sitting side by side with them. And AI can really play a huge power boost in that process to give you the insights you need to have these conversations, but you've got to be ready and equipped to meet them there. So yeah, it was a huge event for us. It was a really, like I said, an opportunity for our team to flex our creative muscle and show that in addition to all the other things we can do, we can plan and pull off a 6-city tour with pop-up banners and swag bags and workbooks and things like that. But that part was perhaps my favorite piece of it because so much of the work we do is digital. And so it was a really cool opportunity to show and showcase our abilities in more tangible formats as well.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like so much fun.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah. A lot of work. But how many people then were at each of the events?
So we averaged about 60 folks per stop. Some cities were a little bit less, some cities were a little bit more. And for a first year, we felt like that was really good. And then we're also going to be hosting, I'll make sure to send you an invite to this. We're going to be hosting a version of it as well. Because of course, when you go out and pick 6 cities, everybody's common feedback is come to my city, come to my city. And I'm like, we cannot fly all around the country, but we felt like it was a good opportunity to take the content that we delivered and then bring it to people online as a 1-day program as well.
Nice. And so while we're talking about AI, I've had a couple people come on the podcast before talking about the algorithms of a lot of things that are out there, especially the algorithms within AI and how there's a bias within them. Do you want to comment about that?
Oh man, like down the rabbit hole we go. lots of opinions here. And they come from my diverse background. So again, there's still a part of my brain that is like a former medical researcher. There's a part of my brain that is all about systems and tech. And then there's a part of my brain that works day to day with people who are scaling businesses. And in all three of those areas, I can see the evidence of bias within AI loud and clear. And it's really concerning for me, right? Because I think that one of the things that AI can do is have an amplifying effect, and it can amplify the negative really quickly. And so I was actually talking at LWT, I guess it was 2 weeks ago in New York, LWT's tech summit. And my topic was on using AI to unlock kind of your creative potential. Basically, my argument about AI right now is that there's this kind of overwhelming patriarchal narrative about AI that it's going to allow you to do even more, which is just this like productivity narrative that I think is highly toxic, because I'm like, I don't know a single woman who needs to do more. I know a lot of women who need to be able to do less. And so my general thesis for the talk was like, let's flip this narrative on its head. Let's think about how we can utilize AI to do less so that we have more capacity for the things that matter in our life, whether that's liminal space, creative thinking, time to have conversations like this. There's so many things that we can be unlocking. But in that, my sub thesis was like, we need to get in this game. The data is showing that like right now, about, I think it's 37% of women are in the process of some level of AI tech adoption, which is about 13% behind our male counterparts. And for me, I'm like, we already have systems and tools that have bias baked into them. We weren't represented in the data sets to begin with because we're not represented in the people engineering this technology. We're not represented in the data sets they're drawing from. Medicine is probably one of the worst culprits there because we're so under-researched as a gender that there's not enough data to draw from. But then on top of it, if we're not in the user base, we're not being a use case for this technology either. And it shows up in all sorts of ways. And so I think that we're about to enter into a very interesting era where we start to feel the effects of AI that is not being tailored with women in mind. I think some of the most prominent examples will start in medicine, but we're also seeing it in the platforms we use. You and I, before we hit record, we're talking about my conversation with Jerry, our friend, about algorithmic bias. And this is no surprise to me. I've worked with all of the top social media platforms for years because we do social media as a service for our clients. And the biases that are baked into these platforms are just getting worse, basically. And so as new algorithms have been rolled out, one of the latest ones on LinkedIn was this last April, every woman I knew saw this huge, substantial fall off in terms of her content engagement. And now we're starting to see people do these comparative analyses where it's like a woman of color and a white guy who are all posting the same content, all have follower counts of similar size. And you can literally see the drop off in the data. Spoiler alert, the white guy gets the most engagement. And I think it's a really important moment for us to titrate the way that we're engaging with this technology. I think that unfortunately, because of the culture in the US, I don't know that we'll regulate in the ways that we probably should or as swiftly as we should. But I also think that we need to remember, as users of this technology, we can and should have a say in how it's built. And that's where we really need to advocate and communicate with the companies whose tech we're using or take a stance. Like for me, what that looked like was last year, our company completely deplatformed from all Meta products because we were really sick of seeing the ways that they were proliferating hate as part of their algorithm and really focusing on things that promoted rage. And for me, as a leader of a company with a conscience, I'm like, I can't in good faith participate in a platform that's like their primary measure of success is like how much they're rage baiting people. And so for me, it was the right decision to take our company off that platform as a way to take a stand and just to draw our energy back and focus on other tools and systems. But I also think that we're in this really tricky moment where there's not really a platform right now that I feel like, maybe with the exception of Substack, that I feel good about, you know? And so it's this catch-22 for all of us who create content. If we want to get our work out there in the world, and also these are platforms that are actively promoting bias and proliferating the work of certain people over others.
Yes, I've seen it a lot also. And you're not kidding about that drop off on LinkedIn. I think everybody felt it, or at least everybody that I was talking to also. Crazy. So I've been hearing a lot more about Pinterest lately. Are you hearing anything about that?
Yeah. And what I will say is, like, if you study Pinterest, they are one of the companies that has taken a stand. The downfall of Pinterest right now, I think, is the uptick in AI proliferated content on Pinterest. And so they're doing their best. And also there's a lot of interesting new content that's coming out. So what I do appreciate about their platform, though, is that they've really focused on having kind of core policies in terms of the ways that they're utilizing data, the ways that they're protecting people's information, and also ensuring that they're actually monitoring the content that goes out on their platform. That's one of the other things that we see on platforms like Meta, is not only are they inciting rage and truly hate on their platforms, but then on top of that, they got rid of all the human moderators. And so there's not people ensuring that the content on their platform is appropriate. But Pinterest does have some really great capabilities. It's for a certain user type. Like, I think that it's not a fit for every single brand, but especially for D2C companies, I think it's a great platform, or anyone who's doing content that has that very aesthetic element for it. Like, we've used it in the past. For example, we had a few clients who were holistic health providers. And so we would do recipe content on Pinterest for them. And that worked really well to drive backlinks back to their website and their larger programmatic work. But yeah, the only thing that I'm watching right now with Pinterest is it's been really interesting. Like, I still use it just like generally to be like, oh, what should I wear today? Or what should my next haircut look like? And when I start to prompt in those cues, I'm starting to see more and more of, we all know that AI face girl, like she just has proportions that are not real. And so there's more and more of that cropping up on the platform. So it'll be interesting to see what they do over time to moderate that, because one of the things that concerns me, and again, I'm like, apologies, I could stay in this rabbit hole for 100 years, but is we've seen so much with social media over the past decade of the impact on young people. And I feel so fortunate that I was old enough to not experience a platform like Instagram until I had a little bit more of a frontal lobe, because we see from the data how much it can be really harmful, particularly to young people and particularly to young women. And so that's one of the areas where I just have fear and concern. I have sons, but if I had a daughter who was going on platforms like Instagram or even Pinterest now, like there is a standard of beauty that is being perpetuated by a lot of this AI that is really toxic. And again, it goes back to the core data sets. If you go into ChatGPT, I haven't tested this on GPT-5, but I've tested it on all the other versions, and you just give it a prompt to make you an image. And many of the image generators, the first draft of that image will always be like a very thin, very busty woman. And to me, I'm just like, yeah, of course it is, because who are the people who are designing these algorithms? And also, that's not what human beings look like. And we're seeing this increased wave of these fake personas of people being generated on these platforms. And that, I think, is something that we need much more moderation around, or at a minimum, labeling and saying this is AI generated content. But it's the Wild West out here right now.
It really is. It's crazy. Yeah, we had somebody who actually came on in the podcast and talked about, they gave a prompt, and this was in Midjourney, and the prompt automatically created a professor. The prompt was something about a professor, and automatically created a male person standing at the front of the room. And it took many prompts and telling it pretty directly what the prompt was supposed to do in order to get a Black woman standing in front of an audience. It was crazy. Yeah. So I can only imagine.
And it's such a pro con, because it's like, in some ways, AI has unlocked the ability to create imagery that we really need. There's still such a lack of representation in things like stock imagery that I love using tools that I can prompt to be like, no, I want an image that looks like this. But it does take a lot of prompting and finessing, because again, if you ask for a woman of color, it's going to give her with a certain hair. And then you have to like really work with it. And yeah, pro con here, but for sure, I'm not surprised about that. That reminds me of the one on LinkedIn too. There's been this trend where people who've been working with GPT for a while will go back to it and be like, I'm going to give you some credentialing about me, my success, and who I am and what I've done in my career and things like that. And I'd love for you to create like an image that represents me, basically. And it's 90+% of the time women are receiving an image back that's a man. And so there was this trend on LinkedIn of sharing and showcasing, this is who GPT thinks I am because of my credentials, as opposed to recognizing women can be successful too.
Amazing. That's so crazy. Oh, Madeline, tell us where people can find you and all the good things.
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to find me. LinkedIn is probably the best way these days, just by my name, Madeline Reeves. If you're curious about my company, Fearless Foundry, it's fearlessfoundry.com. And then on social media, my handle is @it's Maddie Reeves. It's a little cheeky play, because when people ask me how to spell my name, I go, it's Maddy Reeves. So @Maddie Reeves is how you can find me on social. I'm not very active on anything other than LinkedIn these days, but I've got profiles all over the place.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show today and telling us all about the work that you're doing and how important it is to create content that isn't just content for content's sake. I love that.
Thank you, Marcia. It was an awesome pleasure to be here.
Thanks for listening. To connect with me, visit my website at marciadawood.com. And please subscribe, follow, and leave a review. It helps the podcast get seen by more people. And remember, you can also find the Angel Next Door podcast on YouTube too. And if you're looking to learn more about investing in the changes you want to see in the world, sign up for Ann and Bill Payne's ACA Angel University classes. Go to theangelcapitalassociation.org, all one word, to find out the schedule. And classes are now available on demand. Many classes are offered, everything from angel investing basics, which include fundamentals, risk, due diligence, term sheets, valuations, returns and portfolio strategy, and even a class on group formation. There's even a deeper dive where you can get advanced classes, including capitalization tables, startup boards, and exit strategies. If you're not already a member of the Angel Capital Association, you can become one for a low price that will give you unparalleled access to discounts, free webinars with a huge archive of content, networking opportunities, and much more. We'd love to have you join us.
All content for this website is informational and not intended to serve as legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. While Marcia, that's me, does serve on the SEC Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee, my views are my own and not the views of the SEC or my fellow colleagues on the committee. Our speakers and hosts are thoughtfully selected for their educational value, but their opinions are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the host, me, or the Angel Capital Association, and neither specifically endorse the use of presenters' products or services. Listeners of the podcast should consult their own tax, investing, legal, or accounting advisors before making important financial decisions. All warranties, including accuracy, completeness, and suitability for specific purpose, are disclaimed.